Well, good afternoon. My name is Norma Rojas Mora. I'm the Executive Director of Government Relations and Partnerships for the Kern Community College District and Bakersfield College. And I'd like to welcome you to today's CERF update. We have set up these weekly calls at noon to provide updates on the ongoing CERF process. You will hear from all of the partners and have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. Your questions, actually, you can ask along the way in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we will be sure to answer those questions. To get us started, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jessica Grimes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So as my colleague Norma was stating, we have weekly updates on Tuesdays. They will be virtual, so we hope that you will be joining us for those updates. On the slide deck agenda for today is we'll talk about the grant itself, the Community Economic Resilience Fund, provide some clarity on some issues and questions that we've been receiving and want to kind of provide some information about that. Also, the Kern Coalition, as we said before, represents several of us on this call. And so we have some updates related to our partnership and collaboration. Last week when we met on Monday, we talked about community engagement meetings and the opportunity to be a part of that, to provide feedback for the development of this grant. So we'll give you more information about that. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, we have the questions and answers. Before we advance to the next slide, I do want to say that you are going to see definitions on the slide. We will make sure that this is updated on the CERF website so you can see that information. You may also see page numbers. That is referencing the request for funding information. So anytime we're taking language from the grant, we're providing the proper attribution for that. So to get us started, I'm going to pass the mic to Jeremy Tobias.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grimes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeremy Tobias. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about our planning grant. As you've heard us mention in prior meetings, our planning grant submission is due on July 25th. So it's a tight turnaround. We have basically 3 weeks from yesterday to get our grant submission in. SB 162, the authorizing law, does authorize up to $5 million for the planning grant for each region. And I think it's worth remembering, as you can see on the map on the screen, Kern County is its own region, which is a good thing. It's a big deal, and it's an acknowledgement from I believe, the state that we have our unique set of situations here in Kern, and so they decided to give Kern its own region. The planning grants include the fiscal agent, the regional conveners, and coordinators working on the following key items: producing a robust regional economic development plan, creating an inclusive planning table, strengthening collaboration, including evidence-based strategies, and ensuring the participation of a diverse stakeholder groups. And as Dr. Grimes mentioned, that's referenced from page 19 of the grant material. Also, I'll note that notification on the planning grants will occur in October. Thank you. I'll turn it over to the next slide, which is slide 4. And I believe that is Dr. Grimes who's taking that slide. Imelda?
Yes, thank you, Imelda.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tobias. Thank you, Jessica. So upon notification of receiving the planning grant, the Kern High Road Transition Collaborative will develop a regional economic recovery and transition plan that will address essential elements of the High Road strategy. Now, the High Road strategy is a set of economic and workforce development strategies to achieve economic growth and equity and shared prosperity and a clean environment. What about that? A clean environment. We all want that. The sub-regional and inter-regional plan will be co-developed with diverse stakeholders. Everyone, from visioning to analysts, analyze to strategy and roadmap creation. The informal collaborative partnership agreement is designed to support this process. The collaborative partnership agreement is an informal agreement among all current road training partnership members and stakeholders. So we're including everyone in whole Kern County, and we will be visiting several regions to get your input. So please stay tuned. This is very exciting, and we look forward to working with all of you. I believe next slide 5 is Jessica.
Thank you, Imelda. That is my slide. So as you can see in the former slides, we do have several phases of the Community Economic Resilience Fund. The planning phase, which is what we're working on right now, we will receive notification about that in October of this year. And then we will transition to the implementation phase, which is both planning and implementing a robust, if you will, project that really addresses good jobs with equity and also good jobs that provide a family sustaining wage. Those are called high quality jobs. But I wanted to really highlight that when we talk about equity, it is not some sort of just nebulous concept. It's actually focused on 3 areas: economic, environmental, and health equity. And when we talk about economic equity, we're talking about having access to those opportunities that really bring people out of generational poverty that occurred before the pandemic and during the pandemic. The environmental equity is about really looking at the environment, creating thriving communities and environments for families to live in a shared prosperity model. And then the health equity, again, kind of combines these concepts in addressing climate change, economic disruptions, and other issues that impede overall shared prosperity and well-being. The next slide is, I believe, JP, so I will pass the mic to JP.
Thank you, Jessica. So we have got a simple kind of landing page website up and available to you. The link or the address there is at the bottom below the picture, kccd.edu/CERF. There will be a more robust standalone website developed at a later date. But in the meantime, you can find information there that we'll continually be posting. And you can also always reach the whole team. We all get the emails at kerncerf@kccd.edu. Next slide, please. Did you want me to speak to this one too, Jessica?
No,
This is Raina.
Raina, are you there? I think this is perhaps your slide. If
I think
not,
there was a little bit of a mix-up.
Yeah, I could speak to this one. As the regional convener, the Kern Coalition will implement transparent and inclusive processes to advance long-term prosperity and equity to create the Kern High Road Transition Collaborative. It is committed to the CERF goals of equitable economic resilience that expands opportunities for disinvested in bringing good jobs, supporting healthy communities and sustainable industries, and attracting businesses for a community-wide vision of shared prosperity for all.
We're really excited to announce today, and this is one of our updates, that the coalition is excited to welcome Building Healthy Communities Kern to the co-convening group. Building Healthy Communities Kern is working to advance health and racial equity for all through power building in collaborations with residents, youth, nonprofit organizations, healthcare providers, educational institutions, and other local agencies. So they will be adding much to the conversation as we look at equity for Kern County. Imelda?
Thank you. The Kern Regional Convener will develop the Kern High Road Transition Collaboratives to focus on implementing the CERF with representation from labor, businesses, community, government, economic development, philanthropy, education, and workforce partners via the Collective Partnership Agreement Letter.
We do have some upcoming meetings scheduled. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we will be holding weekly CERF updates. Those will be held virtually on Tuesdays at noon. We will also be hosting community engagement meetings, which will be held across Kern County in a hybrid format. Those will be at 5:30 p.m. And the hybrid format will consist both of an in-person presentation as well as a virtual option to attend. This week's community engagement meeting will be held on July 7th at the Friendship House Community Center, which is located at 2424 Cottonwood Road. Again, July 7th at 5:30 p.m.
So as we said before, this is a quick weekly virtual update. Now it's your turn. If you want to put in the chat your questions, I do think that I saw one question. Will weekly updates be archived? Yes, those weekly updates will be, we're recording and we'll have that information available to you at our Kern CERF website. Are there any other questions?
Jessica, since questions are not populating in the chat, I do have a frequently asked question I might be able to pose. What types of projects will CERF fund, and who is invited to participate in influencing those projects?
There are a variety of projects that CERF funds, but most of them are about two areas of emphasis. One is really developing the workforce pipeline in high priority industry sectors. So that could be in healthcare, ag, advanced manufacturing, lots of different areas. And so that involves really a team of teams. That's why we mentioned the High Road Transition Collaborative and what Imelda talked about. It takes all of us to really come together through the Collective Partnership Agreement letter. And so when we talk about who we're asking to engage, we're asking people from industry, we're asking people from community, from labor, from education, workforce, you name it, environmental and social justice groups, a lot of different folks coming together to help us figure out what does this look like? How do we prioritize equity? And how do we create a path for those individuals who have been struggling to find sustainable wages for their families so that we can really make an inroad in the unemployment rates for those individuals and also increase their employment opportunities. And I see that we had a question about, okay, so that was answered. The Friendship House is the virtual and in-person meeting for the 7th. Are there any other questions in the chat?
We do have another question. B3K is listed as a member of the coalition. If you participate with B3K, does that mean you are also a part of this coalition?
You are definitely welcome to be part of the coalition. Inclusivity is the DNA of this grant and also the DNA of the Kern Coalition. So one of the things that we think is really special about our coalition is that we're really bringing in a lot of key partners, as we stated in the first slide and also another slide, and they're key stakeholders. So we would hope that you would participate and bring your best ideas and be a part of our, what we're calling the Kern High Road Transition Collaborative. So I know that I kind of answered a lot there, but yes, you would definitely be welcome to be a participant in this work.
When speaking towards generational wealth, will there be any funding focusing on quote unquote home ownership?
So we have to make sure that it's within the guidelines of the CERF grant. It may be, this is one of the things that we mentioned on Monday. CERF is really about employment and centering the worker and making sure that we're finding jobs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Kern High Road Transition Collaborative is limited in the types of proposals that perhaps might come forward. That said, it may be that we need to look at other resource allocation for other projects that support the shared prosperity goal of the CERF grant.
How do you define a high quality job as outlined by HRTC and the CERF funding?
A high quality job is one that has economic mobility, meaning that the wage is one that supports a family. It usually means that there are benefits with the opportunity for advancement. So when we think about the ways in which we understand wages, we do have different metrics. We have what's called the living wage that MIT has developed, and you can go to the living wage calculator. Usually it starts with a single adult without children, and it goes forward. The high road transition strategy is to really push us beyond that, because we know that families are the ones who have been suffering and don't necessarily can't necessarily survive on just a living wage for a single adult. So it's kind of expanding that definition beyond just the living wage to what's called a family sustainable wage, which varies in terms of the different CERF regions. Kern County's family sustaining wage is obviously going to be different than perhaps another CERF region. But that's why when we mention those individuals that we want to work with and organizations, we mentioned labor, industry, businesses, all of that is a part of that conversation of what that actually looks like and what type of planning needs to take place in order to support that strategy.
We have a couple more populating now as we speak. Can the proposals for home ownership come through the Kern County Housing Partnership?
If I'm understanding the question, I think the question is about if you can advance a proposal. Absolutely. One of the things that we want to do with the Kern High Road Transition Collaborative is to provide technical assistance for community-based organizations and other entities that are working on ways in which we are supporting decreasing generational poverty. So it may be, as I said before, that the CERF guidelines might not support a home ownership proposal per se, but that doesn't mean that we can't provide technical assistance to pursue a different allocation, maybe federal, state, or even philanthropic, that can support a home ownership proposal. In other words, we're seeing this HRTP, if you will, or TC, as something that is both in the CERF guidelines, but also expanding out in this whole community-wide understanding of shared prosperity. So the short answer is yes, but then also to issue the caveat that it may be that we have to pursue a different funding source for those proposals that fall outside the lines of the CERF guidelines.
The process the state is using for CERF seems much like the TCC grant program. Namely, they issued a planning grant first, followed by an implementation grant. The planning grant was meant to prepare you to apply for the implementation grant. Is that perhaps true for CERF as well?
Yes, the timeline for the entire grant is 5 years. I believe it was Jeremy who mentioned we have about 3 weeks to apply for the planning grant. We get notification in the fall of 2022, 18 to 24 months window of planning what we want to do. And then once we have our what's called the regional economic and transition plan in place, that pretty much provides what not only our baseline is, but also what we want to do in terms of our investment proposals and projects, then we can start applying for the implementation piece that allows for 35 million and a little bit more for each CERF region to apply for. So it is a similar setup.
This is a follow-up to a previous question. How will you select or retain the technical assistance providers?
We're in discussion about what that looks like, but we imagine that we'll need to have various arms of providing technical assistance. So I'm going to provide a hypothetical situation, emphasis on hypothetical, because we're building this, right? We're developing this. But let's say, for example, a community-based organization presents a proposal for a certain subregion of Kern County. The technical assistance may be that that group needs help with grant writing. And if that's the case, it does allow, the CERF grant does allow for subcontracting out to experts in that area. Or it may mean that that group needs more research done to really identify what the issues are in order to really tailor what makes sense in terms of providing high quality jobs. So what I'm basically saying is we want to make sure that we're nimble enough to provide the technical assistance that's needed, but also think broadly about this. Technical assistance can look like, research for labor market information, for economic analyses, that is available, but also it's sub-regional, so we might be providing technical assistance about that. Industry expertise, technical assistance may come in that form as well. So it really kind of depends upon what's actually needed to make that assessment and to be flexible enough to provide that technical assistance when needed.
It appears that that covers all the questions presented thus far.
I want to mention again that this is an ongoing conversation. The Kern CERF website has been posted, I believe, in the chat. This is not the end. Obviously, you'll think of other questions. So we do encourage that you use that email address. And as we said before, we hope that you will continue to join us for our virtual updates on Tuesday afternoons at 12 o'clock. Because as we continue to develop and as we continue doing community engagement meetings, you might come up with more questions. Another piece that we're doing is we're collecting the questions that you ask in a frequently asked question format that will be accessible on the website. So even if you didn't ask the question, but you thought, you know what, I want to know what that answer is, I encourage you to visit our website to learn more. Thank you. I think that concludes our question and answer. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who joined us for the brief update of the Kern Coalition as it pertains to CERF. And I also want to remind you that we do have the 5:30 meeting that is hybrid, which will be occurring at the Friendship House at 2424 Cottonwood Road. Please stay tuned. We are really sincere about soliciting your feedback and ideas. And so this is definitely an ongoing discussion that we welcome you to continue to be a part of. And I believe that concludes today's virtual update for the Kern Coalition. Thank you.